Cheers, dude. Thanks for having me.
Drew, welcome
this
to
is
the
lovely.
podcast.
Absolutely.
I'm happy we got to ease into it with charcuterie and the beautiful Riesling that you brought, and little Mezcal flight, which we'll continue
best
to
way
sip
to
on
start
some
an
Mezcal.
evening. I mean, how does it get better than that?
I don't know. I mean, more Mezcal, more wine.
Great.
We have that.
That's a hill to climb. I'm right there with you.
We can do that.
So,
Might be the hill to die on.
Oh, that's a good hill. That's a really good hill.
Mezcal and wine.
Oh, yeah.
That's what dreams are made
good.
of.
Buy a little farm, hang out there.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah, raise some chickens.
Yeah. Free range poultry, man.
That's right.
You know?
Rocking chairs on the porch.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is the dream. This really is the dream.
This is America. This is what dreams are made of.
The irony of my family leaving farms to come out here, and I'm like, no, we should go back to the farm.
Moving back. Yeah. That's so funny. I think about that all the time. My dad and my grandpa were both in like construction stuff.
Oh, yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
always like, wish I did more with my hands. And I'm like, oh, my dad told me I graduated high school. What do you want to do? I said, I have no idea. And he goes, please just don't be a plumber.
Yeah.
And when he passed, the first thing I did was like, should I be a plumber? Like, should I throw away my entire career in wine to become a plumber?
Look,
And
it is
then-
lucrative. We need trade people.
He did pretty good.
And
He did pretty good.
I'd be willing to bet you could afford some wine if you were plumbing.
Probably could.
Eh?
Yeah. Maybe I could have some rich clients to just give me wine.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
be like
Find the ones who
like
are
a
like
handyman and SF.
right on the edge there.
Yeah.
Note their sellers.
Yeah.
So,
I was having this conversation the other day. I was thinking like, wine people are kind of like artists. We can just keep working forever and just make it by.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this thing. Or we get adopted by rich people.
yes.
And then they
Absolutely.
love us and they take care of us. And then that's that.
Yeah.
Except Bianca and I are both wine people. So we don't have a rich person to adopt us.
I mean, true. As someone who married someone in tech and is currently breadwinner, it
Right.
really is. It's a very different
Yeah.
world. It's a very
Yeah.
different world.
Of course.
So,
But there's, there's passion and there's...
look,
not
there's a
that
reason
not
that
passion.
most of the people in the wine industry, at least that I know, come from a music background.
Yeah.
Because musicians all end up in the restaurant industry at some point, and that inevitably leads to a career in wine.
Yeah.
If you stick to it.
Yeah. That's funny. Well, you know the routine.
I do.
So let's do a quick recap on your life, your journey, where wine became part of it.
Yeah.
We kind of touched on some things today, but run it back through, and I'll kind of high spot some stuff.
Yeah. So I got really lucky. I have two parents that are farm kids from Iowa that wanted to get out and did. So when I was 16, we got about 6 weeks notice. My dad said we're moving to the Netherlands, and I did the 16-year-old kid thing where I protested and said like, I don't want to do that. Oh, it sounds horrible.
Yeah.
The best thing that ever happened to me. So I mean, wine, it started because we had a next door neighbor who had a wine cellar that was pre-World War II. So it was his father-in-law's wine cellar. And for my parents' 25th wedding anniversary, he opened a bottle of 1954 white Burgundy for them.
Wow.
This would have been 2009, something like that.
Yeah.
I have no idea who the producer was. I don't know what white Burgundy meant at the time. They were words. I knew it was wine in a glass, and he said Chardonnay, and I was like, oh, I've heard of Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And it's one of those moments where you take a sip and you kind of go, oh, so wine can be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. Because at that point, maybe if I'd had something nice, I'd tried Rombauer.
Right.
And that was about my understanding
Yeah,
of wine. From there, we spent 4 years in Europe. I went off to college about halfway through that. Family moved to Switzerland. I mentioned to you earlier that, I came back. I had no friends because they moved while I was in college. And so I spent my time with a Eurail pass and went to France, Italy, and Germany and drank wine, which is the most privileged thing anyone has ever been able to do. I mean, it was out of this world.
And you protested it.
I had to. I was a movie child who was a metalhead. Like,
Yeah.
you just got it,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I from there, I went to school for music, which meant I had a really good shot at making money for a career. Guitar paid well.
Yeah.
And I worked...
If you win the lottery, you make it big.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Right. And, you work in restaurants and you work in sales and you kind of do whatever you have to pay bills. And I moved to California in 14. I moved to Northern California, I should say, in 14. and started work at the Half Moon Bay Wine and Cheese Company. A very lovely lady named Carrie, who's still one of my best friends to this day, got me hired there, and I was the cheese kid, and worked my way up to serving wine at the wine bar, and then it just kind of went from there. I worked at Viognier in San Mateo for 3.5 years, something like that. Ended up head som there. Got out of restaurants, and I got lucky enough to kind of hit perfect timing and got a job at K&L. Spent almost 4 years at K&L all the way through COVID. Then left K&L and went to work with a friend at a startup, a tech startup. They were doing website building for small wineries during COVID.
Awesome.
So that they could have DTC business. And I got hired as the dude that could talk to winemakers, and realized very quickly I hated sitting in front of a computer all day, and building websites is not my thing, but
Right.
I really love the winemakers.
Yeah.
Jumped back into this side of the industry, got a supplier role at a whiskey company, and then here I am. I work in wine sales now. So, yeah.
It's been a journey.
Always is. It's the fun part.
Oh, sorry, we've got this perfect San Francisco aesthetic. I don't
It's
know if
great.
anybody with the microphone will hear it, but this is when you were like, that was the moment you tasted this mid-50s, Chardonnay. I was like, that's what your brain was doing. These sirens were going off. So, I mean, awesome. So your parents, when they moved,
Yes.
you mentioned they were kind of not really into wine, not super wine knowledgeable.
Yeah. I mean, so they liked wine. And I would say my mom more than my dad. We grew up little Catholic kids from the Midwest. Like, wine was always around, but it was never fancy. There was never, any pretense to it. Bud Light was more common than wine was. But my mom definitely enjoyed it. And we moved a lot growing up. So we moved a lot between kind of the Midwest, Southern California. As I mentioned, we got really lucky and we went to Europe. My dad is a very talented, very smart guy, and he really worked hard to make that happen for us. And so wine was kind of always around. But my mom was definitely the person that got me exposed to what wine could be, and took me to wineries, and we went on trips. And when they moved back from Europe, would have been 2012 probably, I was living in St. Louis and coming back and forth quite a lot to California.
Yeah.
And, Santa Barbara was 45 minutes north of them, an hour north of them. So I spent a lot of time in Los Olivos.
Yeah.
And just, exposure.
Yeah.
Right.
And now you're in the Bay. More
now I'm in the Bay.
exposure.
I honestly, that's why I moved to the Bay over LA. I was a musician that said, no, I want to go to San Francisco because there's wine up there, and at least I can get a job in that. And that was a good call.
Yeah.
I'm here now.
Yeah,
so.
Do you think that your time in Europe and your time, riding the train and visiting all these regions, or living in Los Olivos, were they kind of equally as impactful because maybe Los Olivos was a more site-specific experience, or at least you were able to go to Los Olivos a lot more, or being in Europe and kind of visiting each spot kind of independently?
I wish I could say Europe was, because I wish I was smarter and had actually paid attention. It was the beginning of exposure.
Right.
It was the beginning of understanding that wine meant something to people, and there was history to it.
Right.
I was a history minor in college. I'm a big old nerd and always have been. And I think, again, like there's a lot of musicians in this industry, and it's because there's, I think, this thing that equates in the two worlds, where in music, you never stop learning. There's just infinite things you can do and try and create. Wine is the same way.
Right.
Like, there's always going to be something someone can teach me in wine. And so Europe was that first exposure. Los Olivos became an ability to access winemakers, access wineries, and start to learn a little bit more about individual producers and grapes and regions, and understand that they mean something. But I will say, when I took my level 1 SOM, I was living in St. Louis. I went to Louisville, Kentucky to do it because it was the closest one. And I about cried myself to sleep that night after the test because I thought I failed it. Like
Right.
I didn't know there was a right bank and a left bank in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
I was like that ignorant to the world of wine. So I mean, it both of them I think instilled a love in it more than they instilled knowledge, because I wasn't smart enough to actually sit and pay attention at the time.
Sure.
And like that, it took me a couple years to get grown up enough to realize I needed to listen to what people were telling me.
Absorbing through osmosis, if you will.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And we were talking earlier, and you mentioned kind of where you were located. It was really easy for you to bounce into Alsace, bounce into Northern Italy, bounce into kind of, I mean, everywhere. Was there a region back then that spoke to you more, and a region now that you think was like a favorite region that you would go back to? If you had a ticket right now to go back to one of those regions.
Oh yeah. So I'm a Riesling nerd now. I love Riesling. I would say I spent more time in Alsace than I did in Germany or Italy for wine, exclusively because the La Creuset factory was on the way from where we lived to Alsace.
I see.
And my mom wanted to go to that. So, you know, when your family's somewhere, you go to visit them like 5 months out of the year and you got no friends, you spend a lot of time with your mom. And like, that was my exposure to it. If I had a ticket to go anywhere now, I think I regret not spending more time in Italy. Okay. I think I regret not spending more time in Italy for wine.
Right.
I went to Lake Como a lot. Again,
stunning.
Massively privileged. No, I'm not complaining at all. I misused my time.
Right.
And looking back on it, I couldn't have known at the time.
No,
but
I mean,
looking back on it,
it's always 2020.
Yeah. So I think I misused my time then. If I'd had it to redo, that's what I would have done.
Sure.
But Germany as well. I spent a lot of time in the Mosel. And frankly, I spent a lot of time in Rheingau as well. It was the first time you look at wine and go like, oh my God, like what's happening here? Okay, this is really good. I'd drink this again.
Right.
So
I think there's something about Riesling in general that's like a fun gateway wine.
Yeah.
Right? Because even when they're dry, they can be perceived as sweet, right?
Yes.
Because of the fruit profile and stone fruit kind of characteristics and stuff. I think it's kind of every Somm's pet grape. Not every Somm's pet grape, but everybody loves Riesling, right? Yeah. And I think that it's because of the complexity, but equally so, it's a very challenging thing to sell. At least it was in my time at Ozumo, where I would put these wines on and they would be dry wines, and you know, they'd go out to a table and they'd be like, this is a little too sweet. I'm like, this is 3 grams of residual sugar per liter. It's not sweet, you know?
Your enamel's coming off your teeth. I can see it, actually.
Yeah. Actually, you look like you're in pain. Are you sure this is sweet? Yeah.
You're
That's
drooling?
not diabetes. That's acid, yeah. So yeah, that's fun. That's interesting that was kind of like what called you the most.
Well, and that's your cheat, right? It's like if you need, I don't know about you. Every restaurant I ever worked in, you had to have a sweet wine on the menu.
Sure.
When I was at Viognier, my excuse for a sweet wine was Spatlese of Riesling. I always had CH Barret as my by the glass because it's cheap for what it is. You can get back vintage for no money.
That's cool.
And also like, it's really good.
Yeah.
And if you have somebody sitting at the table going, oh, I want like a Moscato or something, you're like, I have a great wine for you.
Perfect wine for you.
This is,
and it's something I believe in selling.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they always were happy. Like there was never anybody that turned it away and said, this isn't what I was looking for.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking that the other day. I was drinking some 22 Lozen Cabinet.
Yeah.
Not Erziger Wirtsgarten, the Sunnener Vineyard.
Yep.
And I was just like, this is great. Yeah. And, I poured it for a couple people at the wine bar, just like a little, hey, welcome thing. Yeah. And some said it's sweet and some said it's dry. And I was tasting it. And it was like nice and tangy and slaty. And you just get all that minerality in it. Yeah. I was like, this is so fun. It's such a good kind of like everybody wine. Mm-hmm. I feel like some Pinot Noir can be that way too, right?
Yeah,
like,
very much so.
They're kind of like very versatile wines.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's why so many Somms love Beaujolais at the same time.
Right.
Like, you can kind of...
Who doesn't love Gamay?
Oh, dude, it's so good.
And if you're listening and you don't love Gamay...
Get into Gamay.
Just
get into Gamay already. Like, come on. Get over it. It's great.
It's like heroin. You just have to do it once, then you're hooked.
And then you're done. And the nice part is it's way cheaper than heroin.
And it won't kill you as quickly.
Yeah. I mean, you can really try.
So sorry for all the addicts out there. I'm so sorry.
We support you.
We support you.
Oh, yeah, no, it's interesting. The everyman wine is, I think, the hard part. And I don't know. You sound like you drink everything. I drink a little bit of everything. It's probably the worst thing that I've got in my life is how much I like to drink different things.
Right.
But I remember when I was selling whiskey, you'd have like a really lovely sweet bourbon and someone would drink it, be like, I just really don't like whiskey. And then you'd pour them like Lefroy and be like, oh, this is great. And you're like, what? How did we? Okay, great. I'm glad we found your thing. I'm glad we found your thing.
Yeah.
So there's just fundamentally not an everyman anything, but there's a few things that like check enough boxes, you can probably cover most of humanity.
Yeah. You touched on something that I wanted to bring up because you were mentioning your time selling whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
And whiskey is something that actually was one of my first loves. I started being responsible for wine program at 19.
Yeah.
But I really kind of like dove headfirst into whiskey when I turned 21 because I was managing.
Yeah.
And I was responsible
and in charge at 19 somewhere where that was legal. Just
that's true.
For everybody.
Not spirits, but wine. And I just kept thinking about like my job's profitability for the business.
Yeah.
How do I do that? Beverage, right? Yeah. And so like whiskey was one of those things I dove headfirst into. And Lefroy, even to this day, is something that I still just the 10-year, I don't really find pleasant.
Yeah.
The quarter cask, remember the quarter cask bottling? That rocked. That was really good.
I mean, smaller barrels, more oak, more exposed. I mean, the thing that nobody gets about hyper peated Scotch is that the older it gets, the less the peat appears.
Right.
And it gets so lovely.
Yeah.
Like, oak does a lot to really help.
Everybody else is
stuff.
doing 12s, and they're like, 10. It'll be fine. Nothing like Band-Aids and campfire in your glass.
Look, Ardbeg 5 is still great.
Yeah.
But you got to be into that.
Yeah.
If you're not into that, it's rough.
Yeah.
Well, so it's interesting you say that. So you mentioned you wanted to figure out how to make money, and fiscal responsibility in a restaurant is so hard, and beverage is where it's at. I still, my spouse, whom I love more than anything in this world, is still flabbergasted when I say they're not making any money off their food.
No.
We're going to spend $300 on this dinner. They made no money off that food, but the $20 you spent on that cocktail, they probably made $8-10 off you.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate that, I mean, so many things about kind of, I think, the hospitality industry are antiquated, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you think about like tipping culture, and maybe I'll get attacked for this, but tipping culture is not a thing elsewhere because they're paying their employees enough, right? Yeah. And I'm not saying that restaurants in America should charge more because I feel like it's already incredibly expensive to dine out.
Yes.
But my point is that like institutionally, these businesses are set up in a different way.
Very much so.
And it's really unfortunate that we've all hedged our bets, not we've all, but like restaurant industry has hedged its bets on profit margin on alcohol. Mm-hmm. You know, a dive bar is different, right? Yeah. You have one bartender, two bartenders, you don't have a kitchen, right? Like you can sell 40 drinks, 30 drinks and break even for the day, right? But a restaurant is different. All that labor is riding on that, right? Yeah. And it's really unfortunate with this, you know, neo-prohibitionist kind of thing that's going on in not our industry, but in our country where people don't want to drink as much. It's scary. And I say this every episode probably is like, if you don't drink because you have a problem, I support you. Yep. If you don't drink because you think it makes you superior, I have a problem.
And I think there's a middle ground there, right?
Sure.
Like I understand. I will try not to drink every night of the week. That's a real goal. We work in this industry. It's a hard thing to do.
It's a hard thing
I agree.
to do.
Nights where I don't have events planned, that's my easy night out, right? But it is definitely a factor for a lot of folks where they understand that they feel better when they don't drink the next day. But they're also, I think, aiming at a different target when they go out for dinner at night.
Right. Yeah.
Like when you and I go out to dinner at night, I'm not going to speak for you here. I'll say for me, it's a rare night where I'm going there going, what is the thing that has the biggest punch so that I can feel like I got a buzz and worth my money? not saying that. I'm looking at that menu going, okay, what's interesting? What haven't I
Yeah.
tried?
Yep.
Like what's, and I also think, and again, you and I have talked about this in the past, I also think there's a thing with the wine industry where we've done a really good job making ourselves seem really fancy and completely killed people's interest in trying to be that fancy.
Yeah.
Like it's a real problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And also the industry changed after COVID. I mean, how many places have you gone where there's a wine professional or just beverage professional that'll come to a table and talk about options?
Infrequent. Kiln.
It's usually
I think I
a
can
song,
count on one hand.
right? It's usually a
Kiln.
Michelin star restaurant.
Yeah, exactly.
And how often are we going to dine at Michelin star restaurants?
Not often. Yeah. I mean, that's something that we talk about a lot too, is like the consolidation of roles that have taken place.
Absolutely.
But also I think you touched on something that's really important that I'd like to echo is like the experiential factor in beverage consumption.
Yes.
Right? Like, I'm not saying I don't drink cocktails when I go out. I'm just saying
I love cocktails. That's great.
I rarely drink cocktails
Yeah.
when I go out because, like, I've had some really good ones. Carlo at Bar Sprezzatura, I mean, his whole team crushes it. Those
Fabulous
cocktails are
people.
incredible.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'm not going to drink a Jack and Coke. Not going to drink a whiskey sour.
Nope.
I'm not really looking for that. I'm not
No.
looking for something that everybody can make.
Yeah.
I'm looking for something a little more unique or a little more kind of. I'm not drinking to drink.
No.
I'm drinking to experience.
Yeah. And you're rarely going to drink something you can do yourself at home.
Yeah.
Like what? I'm not going to go to a bar and again, I understand most.
Although I do drink a
consumers-
lot of beer.
I do too.
I could
that's
open a beer
that's
at
an
home.
end of the day thing. Though,
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I've had wine all day. I want a beer to
Yeah.
cleanse my palate. I'm
Yeah,
happy.
yeah.
But you're not going to make the beer at home. It's fine.
Yeah, that's true.
But consumers aren't. We're in the beverage industry. We know more than we probably should about almost every subject in this world. It's my favorite thing on earth. I could talk about it all day long. It's a blast. But if you walked up to any normal person on the street and you asked them what their favorite cocktail was or to name you 2 gins, they probably couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so it's all
That's
about
true.
safety. If they're walking into a bar or a restaurant, they're going to order an old fashioned because they know it's safe.
Right.
Right? They're
Yep.
not, if they're going to spend their whatever $20 they're going to do on a cocktail now, that's the safe bet. If they're going to buy wine, there's a lot of confusing words on a menu.
Well, and I think that's where you see brand loyalty.
Yeah.
Just like you're talking about. Like that's where the Prisoners and the Kendall Jacksons and the La Cremas come from.
Yeah. Rombauer is not a wine. Rombauer is a brand.
It's a product.
It's a product.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And people are loyal to Rombauer.
Yeah.
My uncle is such a loyal Rombauer person. He had a video call birthday with them over COVID. Like, it's a thing.
Yeah.
And it's not that he likes Chardonnay. He
Yeah.
likes Rombauer.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's like a sports team.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you don't have to know how to play the sport. You don't have to have played the sport. You don't have to even be good at playing the sport if you have played the sport. You
Yeah.
can just be loyal to it because you're loyal to it.
Yeah.
Right? It's something to
It's where you grew up and it's who you know.
put your emotions behind and put your
Yeah.
feelings behind and your beliefs.
And it's comfort. At the
It's
end of the
comfort.
day, if I've had a long day and I want to drink of something I know I'm going to like.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Well, that's like this mezcal that I've poured for you is
Oh,
like it's something that I like, that I know that I like. Oop, I cheered myself.
Good.
It's something that I know that I like, but also it's such an incredibly stable product.
Yes.
That's what I like about spirits, and it's
Yeah.
We'll go heavy tangent here.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I really like to see recently is people like, the Michelin restaurants, but Bar Sprezzatura does a great job of this also, is like highlighting vintage spirits.
Yeah.
So cool. My buddy Joe, who's the mezcal guy that I like, that I keep talking about all night, is he's into that. He has bottles from like the 80s and 90s and stuff, and I'm just like, that's so cool. I wish that I had more foresight to save more things from my youth. I still have a little bit of Hibiki 12, and I don't think I'll ever drink it. I think I'll just save it as like an antique kind of thing.
Yeah.
I might get like a synthetic cork or like a wax sealed cork to just
Yeah,
put
and
in the
actually
bottle.
preserve it.
Yeah.
Or get it its own decanter, and
Dude, at our wedding in June, we like raided my old spirits box.
Yeah.
I didn't actually. My wife's sister raided my old spirits box
Yeah.
and pulled out some old stuff, like some old Jefferson's Ocean Barrel, the first bottling of Ocean Barrel.
Oh, dude.
Cork ripped off, dunked in the bottle.
Yep.
I'm like, fucking kill me, please, Jesus Christ. But at the end of the day, I was happy that I probably would never drink it.
Honestly, it gets shared.
Yeah.
That's what this is about.
Yeah.
Like, I want to enjoy
Yeah.
it with people.
Yeah.
Like we
Except
flew,
when they shot it, then I didn't want to. Yeah. Oof, this is rough. What's that? I go. That's one of my most prized possessions.
Yeah. Oh, there was the Siete Lenguas Criollo, the limited release that they did.
Yeah.
I brought over to a friend's house a while back, and the friend, he had a friend staying over. His girlfriend was with him, and she was mixing it with orange juice and making cocktails and doing shots. And I hadn't been paying close enough attention. I got there. My bottle that was like 3/4 full was gone. They're like, oh, I was not specific enough about what this was. I made a bad call. This was not the group to bring this to. Like, it happens. It happens.
It happens.
She was very happy. Someone enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say lovey.
At least you get to taste it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like when I open bottles and, somebody comes over and they just go, yeah, what's this? Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah.
I started scaling back, Emery's birthday was a couple weekends ago.
Yeah.
And I just filled the sink with ice and put the plug in and
Yeah.
just dunked a bunch of whites in there. And the thing is there was nothing in there that I was like, I absolutely would hate to not taste this wine.
Yeah.
Right? Everything I liked, everything was good. It was great. And I thought it made sense, right? We're at like 3:30, like birthday party for a 2-year-old. So like Rieslings and sparkling wines, But I was just like, I don't want to, this is not like a special bottle kind of event.
Do you find yourself having a hard time with that though? Because I find that I struggle when I'm putting something together. I always overdo it, and I always pull out things that I'm like, I've really wanted to try this. Here's my excuse, and then I realize this is not the crowd that this was for.
I feel like I've gotten a lot better at it over the years, but. Yeah, like, I mean, for our wedding, there was like a handful of people that are like super into wine.
Yeah.
But also it's like our wedding.
Yeah.
Like, it happens once, and so we're opening like 2014 Cayuse Lovers bottling and 2014 Raffinelli Cabs. And we were opening like, we got some O2 Rieslings that we were opening. We opened some old Emmerich Knoll, and we're like opening all this stuff. And like, one of my family members was like, is it okay if I try this? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they're like, are you sure? Like, I don't know that I'll understand it. And I was like, do you like it? And they're like, yeah. And I go, that's all there is to understand.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think with it, I'm probably in the inverse of you.
Yeah.
I am hoarding. We have that offsite storage. And
Yeah.
now I hoard too much because I don't go over there. We go over there once a quarter.
Yeah.
And I dunk 4 cases and I take 1 case back, and it's
so you're exponentially growing your collection.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best way to do it. And again, we kind of maybe are thinking about auctioning some of it off at some point, or again, everybody's always like, well, what are you going to do if Emery doesn't drink? I go, she's just going to sell it.
There's no
and if it's the perfect
world
storage,
in which she's not going to drink though.
I don't know.
Like,
I mean, you never know.
That's
if this
fair.
movement keeps up,
I don't foresee it keeping up.
I don't know.
There's always going to be folks that don't drink, but if there's anything that you can see, it's good times people drink, bad times people drink. It just depends what they drink.
Yeah.
And like, the industry is not collapsing.
Yeah.
It's just quiet.
I like that. That's a good approach. That's a good thought. And it's a good way for us to kind of like branch into like another category of conversation, which is the current state of the market, right?
Yeah.
I think it's challenging times.
Yes,
you think
it's very challenging.
Okay, all right. So,
oh yeah, we're in the middle of launching a new venture in San Francisco in this market.
Yeah,
it is hard.
Yeah,
this is hard.
Yeah.
That being said, though, like it is getting busier. I'm seeing more people in the street. People are going out more. Is it pre-COVID? No, not at all. And there are markets where it's busy. I was on the phone with my friend who lives in Austin earlier this evening, and it's pretty busy there, but it's not crazy.
Yeah.
But it's definitely it's slowly but surely heading upwards. And maybe that's wishful thinking, I don't know, but I'm seeing more people out more regularly than I did even 6 months ago.
Yeah, I feel like I'm really appreciative that Transamerica, Salesforce, and the Visa Building have brought their staff back.
Yeah.
I think it's going to do a lot for San Francisco. I think it already has.
Yeah.
And again, even if, let's say, 20% of those people aren't drinking, and 10% of them are, 20% of them are cocktail drinkers, 20% of them are beer drinkers, and another 20% only drink natural wine. I think I did my math right.
There's no way there's still 20% of people drinking natural wine.
Dude, come on. What? No, come on. Absolutely.
The natural wine movement feels like it's separated itself, where there's natural wine bars, but bars that are not natural wine bars are not pouring natural wine like they once were. Because there was a period where everywhere you went had to have at least one orange wine and something natty on that list. Yeah. And that's what everyone was looking for. Yeah. And then there were the full hardcore natural wine bars. Now most of the menus are not including any sort of orange wine or natural wine or whatever you'd want to be in that category. But the natty wine bars are still there. Yeah. So it's like, I feel like there's like a delineation now.
Sure. I feel like that's probably right. I think I'm still a little shell shocked. No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think I'm just still a little shell shocked of like how quickly it came to.
That's fair.
It came to us, right? Like it was just like head spinningly fast that the market just split, and it's probably because of the 1-2 punch of orange wine and natural wine, right? A lot of people thought all orange wine was natural wine. A lot of people thought all natural wine was orange wine.
Yep.
And it was just like this. Everybody's sitting there and they're going like, so what am I supposed to drink now?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I think that it's slowed, but I wonder how much of that slowing is just because of the plateau in the market. Right? Like
that's fair, but I mean natural, like the orange wines, the natural wines were never the most expensive thing on the menu.
That's true.
And I will say
people need to make money. We're in San Francisco.
Yeah. And I will say
drink champagne.
Drink champagne. Drink champagne. PSA. Drink champagne. The wines that are going by the glass are starting to change a little bit. There's still the menus where they've got really diverse by the glass menus, and it checks the boxes that you needed to check. There's always going to be a Sancerre,
Pinot Noir,
Chardonnay. Yeah. Like it's inevitable. You've got to have them. But there are the menus that still have Chocolina and still have Grenache and still have a blend of something interesting, and we'll sometimes still have Slovenian wine, and sometimes that's orange wine. You'll see Friulian wine more regularly now as well. But the older school restaurants, the bigger restaurants, the busier restaurants, and the expense account restaurants, I don't know what you're seeing. I'm not seeing the same diversity of pours. There's like a couple Sauvignon Blancs and like 2 or 3 Chardonnays, a couple of Cabs, a couple of Pinots, and that's the world. Yeah. It's really constricted around the big 4.
I would say that, in my time at Ozumo, and this is just I'm speaking for myself obviously at this point, is my time at Ozumo, there was always a slot for interesting white and interesting red.
Always.
And I think that's something that I saw most places. And obviously, like, when you look at a list like, John Lancaster at Boulevard, he pours, like, Barolo and Brunello by the glass, right? Like, those, in most places, would fall into the interesting red category because it's not Pinot Noir, Cabernet Merlot, maybe.
And Boulevard's not an Italian restaurant specifically.
Yeah, exactly. So, exactly. But obviously, like, that's a horse of a different color.
Of course. And John is a man in and of himself. He is his own world. Yeah. I wouldn't put any rules or constraints on what he gets to do. He just makes it work always.
He makes it work. Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things to do there was sell like a sick bottle of like Smaragd Gruner Veltliner for like $80 and then sell them a bottle of like, Aubert UVSL Pinot Noir
yeah.
for like 185 or whatever, right? It's like, instead of buying this $250 bottle, you should just buy these 2 really sick bottles because you're going to have light courses at first and light courses after.
And one of the good things / bad things about the market doing what it's doing right now is nobody's spending thousands of dollars on Burgundy in one drop now.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit of money to play with outside of the Burgundy world.
Yeah.
So, like, it's, heartbreaking. Love my Burgundy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's fun to watch that diversify. And I think we've talked about this a bunch. It's pushed me into Spain.
Yeah.
Like, I can, A, afford to drink it every day, and B, really love Spanish Grenache.
Yeah.
Like, Garnacha these days, unbelievable.
I wish that it wasn't happening again at the cost of establishments, right?
100%.
Here, have a little more white.
Yeah,
and then
thank
we'll
you, sir.
talk about the white, and then we'll move it to the red.
Yeah, you're gonna need to tell me. White is the thing I'm worst at blinding. I found out last week.
Again, it's not blindable. It's just about drinking it. I wish it wasn't coming at the cost of businesses, but also it's kind of like we've seen
R.I.P.
it.
Murad too. Good lord, dude. I know
That hurts.
that really hurt.
And Aphotic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aya.
Oh yeah. We have. I think that we've seen this coming for a really long time, right? Like when you look at the Spanish wine market, you look at like Rioja. You used to be able to get like really good Rioja
Yeah.
for like $20, $30, maybe $40, and now really good Rioja is like
Couple hundred.
$80 to $200, right?
You can
Minimum.
spend money on Rioja, man.
Yeah. And now people are kind of like moving into Roberto Duero, and even Toro kind of like had its rise and fall, and now it's kind of still in a fairly good state.
Well, and Penedez is starting to really step up,
Yeah.
and you're seeing like Galicia is really becoming a region. Priorat is Priorat's huge.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing that with, Italy, it's already happened, right?
Yeah.
Like Barolo used to be like a really great kind of alternative for somebody seeking tannin and acid.
Yep.
And now, a cheap Barolo on a list is 160.
Yeah, but cheap, any mid to high level quality wine is 150 and above.
Yeah.
Like there's not. I almost don't trust a wine I don't know that's $50 to $80 on a menu, in a weird way now.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's the whole point. That's why, like, when I go out, I'll drink a glass of wine or I'll get a beer, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm with you. Like, I don't want to commit to something that's 150 or more unless I know it.
Yep.
Which is unfortunate because my exposure to things that are 150 or more is much more limited now that I'm not a buyer.
Yeah,
I know
of
my
course.
book and I know a couple things my friends share with me. But besides that, like, my knowledge is much more kind of like
Focused.
limited. Focused is good.
No, but
Yeah.
I mean, look, your depth of knowledge for what you're doing is clearly going to be higher.
Sure.
When you're, I don't know, maybe you were probably a much better buyer than I was. I'm sure you were, because I was a terrible buyer when I got my first buying gig. But I was very surface level familiar with a lot of things, but I didn't have time, B, didn't have the exposure to really start deep diving on things. It's one of the things that I respect about a few buyers in San Francisco, that I'm blown away at how deep they dive. We talk about Tim at Roaming Goat all the time. That guy dives deep on books.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how he has time, energy, like he really cares about that.
Yeah.
There are a few buyers that really do that, and you can respect them when they say, "Hey, I'll call you if I want something."
Yeah.
Because I know they did their homework.
Yeah.
So that's a blow off by
Yeah.
most people, but man,
Yeah.
there's a couple folks out there that like they do their homework.
Yeah.
But your depth of knowledge for a single book is probably greater than it ever would be, and your exposure, frankly, to the wines in that world are probably greater than it ever would have been. You know, the wine world's too big. You can't know it all.
Yeah.
You just can't.
Yeah, I think it's within a limit, right? Because I also think about it, and it's like I tried more Aubert and more Literai not working for Chambers than I have working for Chambers. Because, I'm at the restaurant, I'm selling it. People go, "Have you tasted this vintage?" And I go, "No." And they go, like, "Have a glass."
Yeah.
You know?
And you're like, what do you mean? You can't just pull samples of it every week? What's going on?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, exactly. I wish. Yeah, I know.
Man.
In my interview, I was like talking about Dujac, and I'm like, "Yeah, I love to sell Dujac." Like, it'd be really sick to like have it in the bag one day. And they were like, you're never going to have Dujac.
That's not
in the
going to
bag.
happen.
And I was like, yeah, but, and it's been 3 years and I go like, yeah, I've never had Dujac in the bag. That makes sense.
Yeah. That's because everyone just buys it blind and it's fine.
Even in a trying market, everything else is not everything else, but a couple other things have a few SKUs laying around.
Yeah.
It's gone. It's eviscerated like every year.
Well, okay, so have you seen anything pick up in the last, let's even just say 6 months? Because I would say, anecdotally, I've seen a lot of changes in the last 6 months in San Francisco that I think I'd been really nervous about for the last 2 years. I got lucky. I worked at K&L for a long time, and I watched kind of Soma and then get really bad.
Yeah.
And it was a slow, painful crawl back out of what Soma became. But the customer base went almost completely to online sales and evaporated in person. And it's started to really come back. But it's been a couple of years of like rough times. In the last 6 months, some energy has come back to the city.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, again, I think having people back in office has been a major wake up.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a heartbeat again.
Yeah.
And like the first couple of days I was like, fuck, why is there so much traffic? I'm so spoiled.
It's the
right?
one good part of COVID.
Yeah.
2019,
I was like, I love San Francisco, but I never drive because it's impossible to get anywhere. I just take the J. And now it's like 2024 and I'm like, why are there other cars on the road?
Why are people here? What's happening?
Yeah. We need more people. We need more people spending money, but just don't drive.
I did this. I went to a movie in Hayes Valley on Saturday night, and I remember pulling in and being like, I can't even turn right here. Yeah. What's happening? Oh wait, no, this is good. This means that people are out and they're supporting things. Right. All right, I'll just plan extra time next time.
Hopefully they're getting dinner before, dinner after.
Yes, and drinks, and they're just they're on the street, and let's make sure that
So I feel like in the last year, the neighborhoods have really exploded. Like the Marina's doing well, Pack Heights is doing well. Hayes Valley is kind of a mixed bag because so much of their business I feel like was dependent on like concerts and what are they called, like expositions or whatever. And so yeah, and then as far as like regionality of what's selling, I feel like again the outlier regions are selling more, right? Southern Italy, Portugal, lesser known regions of Spain.
Etna's been really growing,
banging it, and then domestic, non-indigenous. Well, I guess none of them are indigenous, but like Italian wines grown in California, interesting varieties grown in California.
Yeah, interesting.
Like Charbonneau, Chenin Blanc, shit like that. So
I love that Chenin Blanc is considered an interesting variety. Vouvray for me is one of my desert island wines. Chenin Blanc is almost like Riesling in that there's so much variety and it can grow in so many places really well that you just have infinite variability there.
And they make essentially a sect from it sometimes too.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Yeah. And you can get what you want. Yeah. You really can.
Sweet, dry, sparkling.
All of it.
All from one thing.
Yeah. And and Vouvray is obviously kind of the poster child of that, but like South African Chenin Blanc, friggin' yummy.
I love Esteen.
Oh, dude, it's so good. There was a really interesting non-vintage blend of Chenin Blanc that was a Chenin Blanc made as an orange wine, a Chenin Blanc made as a dry white wine, a Chenin Blanc made in a heavy lees aging, and like one other style that were all blended, completely non-vintage, all from South Africa. And it was like $13 on shelf.
What?
And it was friggin' banging.
Where'd you get it?
So good. K&L.
Oh.
This was like, again,
do you see this wine anywhere anymore?
That's gone now. Yeah. It was like the final vintage of it, and I was like, all right, I shouldn't say that. It was the final non-vintage of it.
Sure.
But like, it was one of those things where you're like, and it had like a sheep's head on the label that was just the tendons.
Yeah.
So it looked rough.
Yeah.
But man, it was really cool.
Well, that's cool. They were just like, we're going out of business. Dump it all together and bottle it.
Yeah. And that's why it was so cheap. Like K&L like bought the entire the entire lot of it and like imported it. It was so good. But also one of those wines that I definitely couldn't take to a non-wine person and be
Sure.
like, you should try this, because
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
you might really not like this, or you might think it's awesome, and I have no idea what it's going to be.
I feel like Syrah can be like that too.
Syrah so can be like
right?
that.
Like I love basically every Syrah. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of Syrahs that I don't like,
Yeah.
but Syrah can be a really kind of like polarizing wine for a lot of people, right? They can
Interesting. Yeah, okay. I can see that.
not like the pepper. They can like the pepper. They can not like the meatiness.
It's
they can
so
like the meatiness.
funny that like that's the defining characteristic for Syrah. This is where palates differ.
Yeah.
Because for me, when I drink Syrah, the two front notes are always olive, tapenade, and blueberry.
Sure.
Like those are my, and pepper is there for sure. Meatiness is there, but they're just not the things that stand out for me.
Yeah.
And I have friends that can't drink Cab Franc because it's so pyrazine forward. They think it's so bell peppery, and I'm like, it kind of tastes like black currant and chocolate.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm similar in a lot of ways. Like I don't like a lot of Cab Franc.
Yeah.
More particularly like Chinon, I'm not usually a fan of.
Yep, fair enough.
Some Samore Rouge I can like really get down with.
It gets
right?
richer though. Yeah.
Yeah, but some of them are good, and there's some domestic Cab Franc that's done really well. But yeah, I mean, Syrah for me is always kind of like one of those things that like the fruit component is always hard, right? When you're talking about like blind tasting wine.
Yep.
Or even for like a new person when you're talking about like fruit, like what fruit does it taste like?
Yeah.
And they're like raspberries. And you're like, perfect. And they're like, I don't know what else. What other fruits are there, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of always seek out, olives and smokiness and meatiness, because those are kind of like the outlying factors that I think differentiate it so much, right? And picking blue fruit is harder for me than picking olive.
Yep.
Right. I feel
that.
like I could get that a little bit easier.
Because olive is such a unique characteristic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm kind of like looking for the outlying factors to it.
Which is probably why you're better at blind tasting than I am.
I don't know that I'm better at blind tasting than anybody, honestly. I think that I know what I'm talking about, but sometimes when it gets in the glass, I don't know shit.
Welcome to the wine industry, my friend. That's what we're all doing every day.
That's perfect. That's great. We're all jacks of all trade and master of none.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I don't know. We live in an interesting industry. I mean, one of the best things in the world about it is how much passion there is. And inevitably passion leads to some egos sometimes.
Can.
And I will be the first one to tell you that I don't have the best palate in this industry. I just love this whole thing. My wife has a better palate than I do, no question.
Yeah.
And if she spent the time that I do with this, she'd kick my ass all day long.
Yeah.
But it is such an industry driven by people that want to be here. And again, coming back to that, it's like artists.
Yeah.
You live broke doing this. Like, it's great.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's also a very picky industry. You've got to love it. Otherwise, you're not going to stick this out. You know?
And I think also to echo back on things that you've said too, like we do a really good job of like alienating not just new people, but even experienced people, you know? Great example, somebody we were talking about earlier today that's like, I don't like Psalms.
Yeah.
I don't like to hang out with Psalms, right? And it's like, yeah, because so many Psalms, not even nowadays. Nowadays it's not really that bad. I feel like the State of the Union after the pandemic has really
Completely
kind of
changed.
just like leveled everything.
Yeah.
Everything's different. Everybody's different. Everybody has too many roles.
Yeah.
And I feel like things are so vastly different than they used to be that it's probably for the best, honestly. I wish it didn't happen, but it's probably for the best.
There are too many hats being worn by one person now.
Yeah, that's the big issue.
Unless you are a very particular type of restaurant, you cannot afford to have someone whose entire job is to think and talk about wine.
And even if you can't afford it, you probably don't want to.
No, that's your margin.
Yeah.
Like, and we live in a very expensive city. You've got to have a decent salary to be able to figure out how to live here.
Yeah.
Folks that are doing that are also usually working second jobs and
Yeah.
don't have the time and energy to sit and be pretentious about it anymore. It really is. I'm here because I love this, and I'm
Yeah.
going to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, I'm going to sacrifice my free time
Yep.
to make this work.
Yep. And I want more people in this bubble with me, because the more people that are in here, the more exposure we get, and the better this is for all of us.
And I think too, it's kind of like that mentality of like high tide raises all ships.
Yep.
You know, if we're not communicating with each other, I mean, that's the whole impetus for the podcast, right? Is to like kind of reestablish the wine community in San Francisco, and not just San Francisco, but beyond, right?
Yeah.
We've had our first interview with somebody outside San Francisco.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, James Tran at Artisan Wines.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, we've had a restaurant approach us from Chicago, and they want to do a Zoom, which we're not really into the idea of. I mean, if anything, we're looking at like Q1 traveling to Chicago,
Awesome.
and going and filming like 4 or 5 episodes and doing just like a mini series in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, the food scene in Chicago is out of this world.
It's supposed to be. I've never been.
Oh,
I know.
All right. Well, when you do that, we'll talk.
Yeah.
I went to college in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time in Chicago.
Yeah.
Let's talk.
Let's go together.
If I had time, yes.
Oh, I
100%.
guess. Yeah.
I'll watch Emery for you here while we.
Don't even. We'll take you up on that. Well, let's knock out this wine.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you like the wine? That's always the question.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you feel like you want to even try to identify it? Again, you absolutely don't have to.
I can try. I'm going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
I will be the first one to say we did a blind last week. We had 4 whites, 4 reds. I got 1 of the whites and all 4 of the reds.
Sick.
Which got lucky. They were varietals I was very familiar with, but it made me realize 1 of the whites was a Chard, and I did not call it.
Yeah.
Which is, all right, cool. I drink a lot of Chardonnay. That sucks.
It's such a tricky bastard, though, right?
It is. Look, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are fun, not because they're delicious. I mean, they are.
Yeah.
But because they're like fader switches. Like, there's a lot of wines where it's got this style or this style, and Chard and Pinot can kind of be anything on this massive spectrum. And again, we go back to talking about people who aren't in the industry and kind of describing, bringing them into the bubble a little bit.
Yeah.
People who say I don't like Chardonnay, or I don't like California Chardonnay, or I don't like buttery wines or sweet, whatever they are going to use as the descriptor there. I love Chardonnay because I can say, great, I won't give you that.
Right.
And you give them a Chablis, you give them a Merceau, you give them, dude, even Maya Kamis Chard, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You can have some amazing stuff, and I'm like, oh, what is this? And it's Chard.
Oh yeah, right? I used to love that. I used to at Ozumo, somebody would be like, and this is Ozumo in 2020, right? This is still happening in San Francisco, being the wine industry that it is. They'd go, what Chardonnays do you have by the glass? And I would go, oh, we have this and this, and then we have the Chablis that's this, and they go like, I didn't ask about Chablis.
Yeah.
I'll go like, okay, how about this? I'm just gonna bring you a flight, and you taste stuff and tell me what you like. And they go like, okay. They go like, I like this one. I go, that's Chablis. It's Chardonnay. Thanks. Yeah. And it wasn't not always to be a dick, but just to be like, hey, like, if you ever, this isn't what I would say to them, but this is what I try to remind myself of. If you ever think that you know everything, you know nothing.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, if you think you got it, you're fucking wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
But, I mean, it also lends credence to the complication that is the wine industry. I was at a bar the other day talking to a guy, and he said, oh, I really love Sancerre, but I really don't like Sauvignon Blanc because I feel like Sancerre has this awesome finish and Sauvignon Blanc just doesn't.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'm not going to sit. I don't have time to sit and explain to this man that what he's saying is just nonsensical.
Oxymoron.
But it's also not his fault.
Yeah.
Sancerre and Sauvignon Blanc don't sound like they're supposed to be the same thing. There's no reason he should know that. He's been to a couple of bars and he's had a couple of wines, and it's like my sister's graduation party for college. Her entire dinner was entirely Sauvignon Blanc. It's her favorite wine on earth.
Yeah.
We paired 5 courses, I think, with different Sauvignon Blancs.
It's awesome.
But it's mostly because she doesn't know how to ask for other things.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what you love, stick to it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
it costs money and a lot of effort to branch aside that, and maybe you won't like it. How do you know?
Yeah.
You know?
Like we were talking about, not being willing to risk it on $150+ bottle of wine, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather fit into that like interesting white, interesting
Yeah.
red category and get something in the 120 below.
Yeah. That you know.
Or that I don't know.
Yeah.
120 below that I don't know
Yeah.
if the Somm or Somm slash AGM slash maitre d slash host slash captain recommends it.
Yeah.
Then I'll like it.
But again, like we were at Harris's steakhouse a couple of weeks ago, and they had a Syrah by the glass that Ian Cobble made.
Yeah.
And it was freaking awesome. And honestly, the reason I ordered it is I saw Syrah by the glass, and I was like, great.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
I want to support that placement.
Yeah.
Do more of that.
That's cool. I want to try this.
Yeah.
And it was delicious. And then B, you start talking to the guy, and Scott's fabulous. But knowing that, like, oh, okay, Ian had something to do with this.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
My family's in Half Moon Bay. He was the head somm at the Ritz for a long time. Like, you know, that's a fun little connection that you get there. I don't know how many people realistically, though, are going to go and say, oh, I want to try that Syrah by the glass at a
makes sense with the
steakhouse.
cuisine, but but unfortunately, a lot of people wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason that there's big cabs on that by the glass as well.
Yeah.
Like, that's what people order.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, the wine. The wine is fabulous. Aromatically, a little bit lighter. So, not a super aromatic white. A lot of white floral. Almost like soap level of florals. Not quite jasmine, but kind of in that world. Fruit is secondary. I would say probably incorrectly Old World, but I could be confused on that one.
You're there. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Again, given that this could be any wine in the world, and I feel incredibly guilty anytime anybody tries to blind it.
No, it's good.
You're in the Old World.
I would say Old World. I would say I get salt, I get melon, I get white flowers, I get medium minus acidity. Oh man. Old World, medium minus acidity, driven by florals, melon, a little bit of salt. Am I putting myself in southern France for this? All right, I'm going to make a wild guess, and I'm going to see how far off I am, because I'm probably quite far off. I'm going to say, I might say Italian. This might be Italian. Is it Italian white?
It's not Italian wine.
Oh, damn it.
Again,
What am I?
I always feel bad. It's Portuguese white.
Portuguese white.
Yeah.
This is a Vino Branco.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a...
I wouldn't have gotten this in a million years.
Well, I know. And that's
so
again
cool.
why I always feel bad about it. But this
I don't feel horrible about calling Italian white then.
Well, and you described the wine really well. You boxed it in really well, right? But again, this producer in particular, this is Luis Sierra. He's producing site-specific terroir-driven wines, which again can be slightly, not slightly, very challenging to blind, especially considering that it's made of 4 different varieties that are indigenous to the region.
Sick.
He calls this Chisto Limitado because it's schist soil composition.
Cool.
And then he makes a bunch of single varietal wines from the different vineyards as well. But this is kind of his everyday white blend, his kitchen sink white blend. If you want.
What are my 4 varietals, or even what are the primary varietals on it?
I'm glad that you asked because I have it pulled up because I needed to cheat, and I'll probably pronounce all of them wrong.
My familiarity with Portuguese whites is what?
Me too, but it's delicious.
Yeah.
This is this the 22? Oh, look at that. It's a 96 James Suckling, in case you're a score whore.
Awesome.
Sorry, not a score whore. If you like scores, it's good for you.
It means things.
70% Rebigato.
Okay.
The remaining balance is a field blend of Codega, Guaveo,
Yep.
Viosnia, Dozeliano Bronco.
That's what I was going to say. Dang.
And it's sustainably farmed vineyards planted from the 1920s to 1933.
Cool.
Tended in mica schist soil from 650 to 700 meters, 2,100 to 2,300 feet in elevation. This is a vegan wine.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. In case you were... I guess I should have asked.
I was concerned about the veganism. Yeah, that's why I ate the sausage earlier.
We ate the salami and the cheese earlier, yeah.
It was
clearly vegan.
Well, so this is really interesting. So I second guessed myself because I was Southern French wines have typically more body than this has. This is a little bit lighter. So I went Italian, but I would never have gone.
I like your Southern Italian call. I think it's really important though.
Yeah.
And you kind of nailed it because the acid is deceptively low.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, pretty par for the course in a lot of Southern Italian wines. It has saline, which is definitely a Southern Italian kind of character. And aromatics, which is also Southern Italian character. So I think that you were as close as you could get, right? Again, given that Portuguese wines are
this is
not
super
blindable
cool.
at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a wine industry that is leaning towards Portugal. I mean, Bordeaux is bringing Portugal into the fold, but is leaning towards Portugal for dry, red, and white wines more than they were previously.
Yep.
And it's not just Alvarinho, which is so exciting to see.
Very exciting. Yeah. I mean, I like a Vino Verde.
I love a Vino Verde.
I'm really happy to taste a lot lot of other things from the region that are also delicious.
Yeah. Solero is not the only white wine made in Portugal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Arcanova, Vino Verde.
I do love Arcanova.
Yeah.
Arcanova's rosé has always been one of my favorite. Just I'm gonna sit on a blanket in a park and have some fruit and a bottle of wine.
Pound it to the face.
Oh, it's so good.
It's like 6% alcohol or something.
Just get a funnel.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
Oh. Portuguese wine I think needs more attention than it's getting. That's really, really cool.
And that was my thought when we were talking about this. It's kind of like, I picked this wine before you got here, but in my mind I was like, I want to pour you something that I really like that's from a region that you probably don't get to try a lot of stuff from. Not a lot of people get to try a lot of Portuguese wines. Drink more Portuguese wines.
Drink more
That's
Portuguese
what we were
wines.
talking about. And now we're drinking something different.
Yeah.
So
something a little further east.
Yeah.
So just slightly further east. No, so this is so Casa Castillo. I feel like it's been an interesting time for Spanish wine. Spain is burgeoning is a horrible word because they've been making amazing wine for always, and I think we're just starting to pay attention to it. But like Commando G has been such a popular and desired brand among Soms. The folks at Casa Castillo have been involved in that project for a long time. So this is primarily Monastrell with some Grenache, and it is Las Gravas, gravel soils. 20% new oak, 500 to 5,000 liter foeders, and just really, really beautifully made Spanish red wine. Any chance I get, I'll turn people to Spain. I think it's where it's where the value is right now, but B, there is dramatically underrated high quality wine coming from there. Rioja obviously gets all the attention in Spain. And we talked about Ribera del Duero earlier. We talked about Priorat earlier getting some attention. But there are regions like Jumilla, southeastern Spain, Galicia, northwestern Spain. Like there's amazing, amazing regions that are just not getting the attention they deserve, that are making some of my favorite wines. So, yeah.
This wine fucking rocks.
Yeah.
This is so good.
Beautiful. And it's a little funky. It's a little meaty.
Yeah.
But
it's meaty.
It's Monastrell.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm okay with that, honestly. We were talking about Syrah earlier. This is a lot less meaty than some Syrahs can be, right?
Yep.
It doesn't taste like beef jerky.
No.
Or pastrami.
No. And it doesn't have the weight that Syrah does, but it's a little weightier. It's a little more broad than Garnacha can be. While also still having a lot of that pepperiness, that spice, that brightness. Like, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, this is awesome. I think, I don't know, I'm hopeful that with Burgundy bubble feeling like it's popping and people stopping spending as much money on Burgundy.
Yeah.
You know, I'm hoping that we see more and more people pushing out. And pro and a con, I guess, is, you know, the pro is that the people that are spending wild sums of money are going to pivot to other categories. Like instead of drinking Burgundy, they're going to drink, you know, maybe high-end California producers, or they're going to drink Barolos, right? Somewhere where they can still spend their money. I feel like people that are not willing to spend quite as much money on wine will either pivot into more widely produced wines or more widely distributed wines.
Yep. Which is not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing.
You just got to find the good ones.
Yeah, and I always say, you know, like I sold a lot of Barefoot as a starting sales rep. It's a great gateway wine.
I work for Breakthru.
Yeah.
We sell a lot of Barefoot.
Yeah, it's a gateway wine, and that's what it is. And it gets people into wine. I mean, my grandma still drinks it. You know? Like, I've got no issues with people that drink it.
No.
Right? Like, do I want it? No. If I come to your house and you pour me a glass, I'm going to drink it? Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it means that somebody is reaching for wine over something else. And that matters.
1,000,000%. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's better than the non-drinkers. It's better than the White Claws. It's better than, you know.
Did you see the new White Claw product recently?
No, I don't want to. Don't tell me.
The non-alcoholic White Claw.
What the fuck is that? That's called soda water.
So we've come full circle. We've come full circle where they said people are drinking LaCroix. What if we put alcohol in LaCroix? Now we have a product. Now they've just come full circle back to non-alcoholic White Claw. I cackled. I cackled.
It's just okay. I'm gonna try to take a step back. I'm going to try to calm down so that way I don't come off as condescending or whatever. I feel like this is a great example about how a product can be made without a soul or without intention.
Yep.
If you're able to pivot to market trends rapidly, either way, you're able to produce limitless quantities of your product.
Yep.
And you're able to produce it at all times of the year.
Yeah.
That to me is a great indicator that there's not a lot of kind of like, that's tough. See, now I'm like box myself in. I don't know.
Well, look, authenticity matters.
Authenticity matters.
And one of the things that defines authenticity, which I think is going to always be a fundamental difficulty for anybody who's trying to be authentic, is that they buck market trends. And then when the market eventually comes around to whatever it is that they're producing, they're the coolest thing because they've been doing the same thing since 1875. They've never deviated. And for those first 150 years, they struggled the whole way because no one bought the product. And then now for this cycle, they're the hot new thing. Tequila is the hot new thing. But there were couple centuries where no one drank it. It was a local thing.
Yeah.
And now you're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on adulterated product because that's,
you drink
the trend.
1942 because it's got a cool bottle.
And someone told you it was expensive in quality.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, this tastes like vanilla.
Yeah.
By the way, tequila isn't supposed to taste like vanilla. I don't care what anyone tells you. Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of brings us back to a conversation that we were having earlier off camera.
Yeah.
And it was about the unsustainability factor that's happening in the agave industry right now.
Absolutely.
And yes, this is a podcast often about wine, but I think it's a podcast about the greater beverage industry and hospitality industry at large, and retailers and everybody else.
Yeah.
Anybody that likes beer, wine, or
Libations.
sake or wine
Yeah.
or liquor or whatever, libations. I would have a cheesemonger on here if I could. It's fermented, right?
My first job in
all
the wine
about,
industry was a cheese dude.
fermented things, you know.
Yeah. Dude, I drink coffee almost as a religion.
Yeah,
You ferment coffee beans.
you ferment chocolate.
Yeah.
I just need to find a chocolatier. I don't know if my
I
don't
know
if my
one. I
reach
know
is at
one.
here.
In Half Moon Bay.
Whoa,
She's Swiss.
let's line it up.
Let's get it done. I got you.
So yeah, I think it's really concerning and alarming the rate that agave consumption is going. I think that it's really important, and I'm so grateful for people like Cinco Sentidos and Neta, who are willing to kind of like buy the things, charge an appropriate price for them.
Absolutely.
You know, some of those things are retailing at $200+ a bottle,
$250
a bottle, and they should be, because it's a hyper specific production. I mean, it again, like, you know, DRC gets to harvest those vines every year.
Yep.
That's not the case.
Yeah.
This is not the case.
No.
And, you know, there's a certain lifespan that happens with wine. There's not a certain lifespan that happens with finished spirits, right?
And actually, a vine will produce grapes over and over and over again.
Right.
And agave is a one and done thing.
One and done. And it only, you know, I found this out the other day, and we were driving to the Vinlux warehouse on a weekend recently, and we were driving past a couple agaves. It only flowers once in its life.
Yes, it does.
And there's a couple that are flowering over there right now. And I go like, I wonder if we can capo them. I'm going to just go cut the flowers off, and I'm going to go rip them out of the ground and throw them in the back of my Ford Focus.
Well, what you want to do is when you castrate them, when you cut that flower off, you want to leave it for another year.
Yeah.
So that those sugars concentrate.
Yeah.
Like once that Quixote's up, bro, you got a timer on.
I know. Well, the Quixote's already up though. So does that mean that I'm too late?
No.
Maybe.
No.
Oh,
okay. Once the Quixote's up, you can cut it.
Yeah.
And then you do want it to stay for 6 months a year before you harvest. But I mean, I fundamentally agree with you. I as someone whose first love was wine, I work in wine. It's one of my favorite things on earth. I've spent my career loving this beverage. I will be the first one to tell you that agave should be the most expensive thing in the beverage industry.
It should be.
Period.
It's the least sustainable.
And it's the most site-specific thing on Earth. There is nowhere else on Earth. Mexico is the only place producing agave spirits. If we said that wine could only come from France, and there were, there's 32 states in Mexico, something like that. Don't quote me on that. It's
and
probably
only
wrong.
like 8 of them.
13 of them are certified for it, but every state produces some form of agave, or they produce like a spoon plant to make sotol. Like there's variations on it, but it is so specific. It is so limited, and you have a plant that takes anywhere between 5 and 30 years to come to maturity to produce what will be anywhere between like 20 and 50 bottles off a single plant. Like, I'm sorry. That is the most expensive thing on earth. It should be the most expensive beverage. Respect to the people that work with it. If you've seen anyone try and produce an agave spirit, that is the most unbelievably arduous and painful task.
In a hole?
Not even that. You got to pull a 400-pound agave off a mountain with a donkey, drag it down a hill, and then be committed enough to stay up for multiple days to actually make that fermentation, distillation.
Roast it under a fucking pile of dirt.
For a week.
Yeah.
And oh my God, I'm sorry. You couldn't pay me enough to do that, and we don't pay them anything.
Yeah. I was trying to think of like the only other thing that I can think of that's anywhere near as maybe not rare, but as kind of restrictive in production is maybe, you know, Scotch for peat.
Yeah.
Right? Like peat doesn't grow everywhere. It takes a long time to make.
But there's multiple countries where peat, like Ireland has a lot of peat.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the
Japan.
Japan has a lot of peat. I mean, there are areas where there are peat bog, but I agree. Like,
I can't even think of anything
finite
else.
resource.
Yeah.
Finite resource.
And it's not even, well, I guess it's kind of an AOC system, but it's not only that it's an AOC system, it's also that there's just no other people doing it. Like, there's not a lot. I haven't heard of any, I'm sure there's one or two, you know, agave spirit producing people in the U.S.
There are a few.
Right.
They've tried.
Yeah.
I worked for a company that tried, and they actively said, we gave up. It's so difficult.
Yeah, sure.
Once you've cooked the agave and you start mashing that, like this is a company that worked famously with rye.
Right.
Rye is one of the more notoriously difficult grains to work with because it creates this cap on top of it that is stickier and creates this almost like barrier to it. So if you have enough carbon dioxide buildup in the fermentation underneath it, it'll explode. And there's multiple days they'd walk in the distillery and there's just grain everywhere. Everywhere. And it's because rye is notoriously difficult like that.
Yeah.
They gave up on agave.
Yeah.
I'll be the first one to say I think that should be the thing that we hail as the most preeminent beverage that mankind makes.
Like Louis Letre, cool.
Yeah.
Mezcal, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why also, I mean, that's why you don't often see reposado, añejo, anything coming out of that world because they've already pre-aged that. That plant took so many years to mature. You want the purity of whatever that plant had to offer you. And because of the strictness and the limitation of the designation of mezcal, because mezcal, for those of you who don't know this, mezcal is interesting because tequila is a type of mezcal, but it's also branched off as its own category within mezcal. So mezcal, the overarching term for all agave spirits, you can have tequila and then you've got the mezcal DO, the designate, but it is heavily lobbied for by larger commercial producers. Yep. And so most of the best mezcal can't actually A, afford to, or B, be considered mezcal legally. So it's called destilado de agave on the bottles. Yeah. And these producers are working their whole life to not even be able to call it legally the thing that they're
probably
producing.
Something they've called it forever.
Literally always.
Yeah. Until somebody trademarked like a family name.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's Nahuatl is the language it comes from. Like it's,
ancient Mayan or Aztec.
It's an amazing thing. It's a really amazing thing, and the fact that humans figured out how to make it and then kept doing it, like it's amazing. And now we've got like pulque is coming back, and pulque is essentially the beer to mezcal that beer is to whiskey.
It's like a mash.
And it's amazing. It's really funky. It's really interesting. Has no shelf life. It'll die in a couple of days, so you got to really be there for it. Like, there's all this stuff that's being made that gets no wider attention, and I guess I don't know. I think we do a poor job as an industry, A, making things accessible to people, and then B, also being able to like articulately impress upon people the impact and the interest of the beverage they're drinking, because it should be casual. You should be relaxed. You should enjoy your evening, but then also like what you've got in your glass is really cool. Like it's really cool.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to break down that barrier. We're working on it every day. But there's got to be some magic bullet or hopefully something where we can do both. This is our cake and eat it too moment.
It always reminds me of the falling up and the Where the Sidewalk Ends books.
Yeah.
How to eat an elephant one bite at a time. It's just a really big fucking elephant. We're all trying to eat bites. Not all of us are trying to eat bites of it, but many of us are trying to eat bites of it.
So if you had your solution for it, I mean, I think making the beverage industry and wine specifically accessible to people again is a huge one. But if you had like your pitch to someone who maybe isn't sure or maybe feels that wine is too pretentious, like what are you saying? Like how are you breaking that barrier to start with?
I think you have to play it into intentionality of consumption. Mm-hmm. And this is something Bianca and I talk about a lot, right? Like people that are, buying their groceries at Walmart and eating at McDonald's, maybe it doesn't make as much sense for them. But people that are buying from farmers markets or trying to buy from maybe not even necessarily Whole Foods, but people that are like asking themselves the question, like, where does what I'm consuming come from? That's the thing to me, right? It's like, I would rather you drink one bottle of wine that comes from like a real farmer, a real producer, a family, and support that family a week than drink 5 bottles of something that's, mass produced and you don't really care about, right?
Yeah.
Because eventually what's going to happen is that person that's spending a little bit more money to buy the one really good bottle that they care about maybe will increase their budget enough to the fact where they can buy 2 or 3 or 4 or 5.
Well, but see, that's a big issue for us in the industry, and I think we've done a really bad job at this. I think marketers have done a bad job at this. Winemakers, distributors, like everybody in this industry has done a bad job at this. You say they've saved up a little bit of money to spend more on a bottle of wine that they care about.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends that have tried to spend $80 on a bottle of wine that is garbage.
Yeah.
And the premiumization of the wine industry has done a poor job because quality does not equate to cost.
Not just the wine industry, though.
It's true. No, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, yeah.
It's absolutely true. But
That's marketing dollars hard at work.
Is equating to cost is a really hard thing, specifically in wine, because if they've gone and bought something, let's say a Napa Cabernet that has been around since the 70s and starts with a C, from a family that starts with a W.
And used to make 1 liter bottles, still makes 1 liter bottles.
And charges you $80 for that.
Yeah.
And then I walk up to you
80 on the low end.
80 on the low end.
Yeah.
And I walk up to you with something that is maybe from a really small family in Napa. It's also a Cabernet, and it's $65
from the 1950s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they make an absolutely incredible, like, I love Spring Mountain. Spring Mountain might be my favorite AVA in Napa for Cab because I like mountain fruit.
Yeah.
Right? And I can't afford Howell Mountain these days.
Yeah. Nobody can.
But yeah, dude. But let's say I hand you something from Spring Mountain and I say, this is incredible. And they say, no, I spent more on this over here. This is my special bottle. They've had their $80 they've been saving for a while.
Yeah.
And they've heard of that name.
Yeah.
It's not that it's necessarily a bad thing for them to have done, but it changes what their perspective and expectations for other bottles are in the future. I've had a neighbor walk over and hand me a bottle and say, hey, I opened this. I really don't like it. It's way too acidic, and it's a Zinfandel. I'm not expecting that. Is something wrong with it? And it's beautiful wine.
Yeah.
But their expectation is it's Zinfandel. It's supposed to be big and jammy and heavily oaked.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the perception and the expectation that is being set by folks who are saving their money, hard-earned money, to spend a lot on a bottle of wine, because spending $80 on a bottle, that's a lot of money for someone that's not into wine.
That's a lot of money for me right now. Yeah.
That's a lot of money for anybody.
Yeah.
It is. And if you're not into wine, you don't care about it, that's a lot of money.
I think that, what I was hoping happened, and I think a little bit of it did happen, and maybe more of it will happen if, the economy doesn't kind of shift, is we're going to see a little bit of a scattershot happen.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I moved to San Francisco. Why? Because of the wine industry.
Yep.
But if San Francisco becomes untenable for people like you or me, right? Like, we're going to consider, like, where else could we move?
Yeah.
And we're going to move somewhere else. And we've had this conversation before, like, we're like looking at places like, geographically safe places to live. And it was like Montana. And we went on a road trip during the pandemic to Montana. We went to Bozeman. We went to this restaurant, Plonk. And they had a great wine list.
Yeah.
And it's like, do I want to be a big fish in a small pond? Like, not necessarily, but if I really love wine and I really love sharing the message of wine, like, why wouldn't I?
We're a day away from an important day. Having an ability.
By the time this comes out, it'll be next Tuesday.
So we'll know.
We'll all know.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Cheers. Drink now. But to that point, like, I've got friends that live we live in California. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter which way we go, we know what's going to happen, right? I've got friends I've got family that lives in Iowa.
Yeah.
It's going to go one way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're going to vote their way, but it's going to go one way.
Yeah.
I think that's probably true for what you're saying. Like, if you want to go and affect change somewhere, you've got to go and be that one voice in a void for a while until more voices show up and start supporting that. But it has to start with someone.
Yeah.
And I mean, Bozeman's not a bad place to start. It's a beautiful place.
Tell you
Snows
what.
a little bit, but beautiful place.
Yeah, beautiful place. Much less expensive.
Yeah.
You know, maybe the school system's as good, if not good, maybe better, maybe a little worse.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a lot of life skills to be learned. Yeah, I think that it's kind of this concept of like the wine industry is also a little too insular sometimes, right?
Yes.
We want to surround ourselves with other wine people,
Yep.
or we get maybe a little peeved or a little frustrated or a little exhausted by answering the same question a million times.
Yeah.
But that's also, I think, part of the journey, or at least a phase of other people's journeys, right?
Yeah.
And I think like in a way we've, you know, the wine industry hasn't done itself any favors, but
well, it's fundamentally human to
now.
want to spend time with people that like what you like.
Right.
When I was young and I loved Pokemon, that's what I did.
Yeah.
I spent time with my friends that love Pokemon.
Yeah.
But it's become more and more evident every day and abundantly clear now. I've got friends in the wine industry who are my best friends in the world, and the worst thing that we can do is sit around a table with my wife and her friends and try and be wine people.
Yeah.
It's obnoxious.
Yeah.
We're obnoxious.
Yeah.
And I think recognizing when you're starting to get pretentious and obnoxious and dialing yourself back and being accessible again is such a fundamentally good thing to do, because I have an opportunity with her friends who are in tech and they've got some money they can spend and they can care about what they're buying.
A little bit of money.
And we can sit and have that conversation, and I can create an atmosphere that makes them excited about wine, or I can create an atmosphere that makes them go like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, like, he's a little too nerdy and I don't probably want that, and he's not listening to what I like. That's a very easy thing for me to do incorrectly.
Yeah.
And I think you're completely correct. We as a wine industry have done a bad job of catching ourselves in those moments and saying, no, this is my chance. I don't need to bring them all the way in one go.
Yeah.
I need to bring them one step forward.
Yeah.
And that's all this is.
Yeah.
And I want to go all the way because I'm over here.
Yeah.
But that's not where everybody is right now.
You can lead a horse to water.
Absolutely, you
Can't make
can.
him drink. You know?
And you can lead a horse to water, but if they don't know how to swim, you're not making them go deep sea diving with you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's where we go a lot.
Yeah.
We jump in, 2 feet first and say, let's go. And it's too much information.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited. This book just landed, Kelly White's book. And then, earlier we were talking about John Bonet's book. And I'm excited for more literature out there. And originally this podcast started as like a consumer podcast. And the original season 1, which we've archived, was about like educating people on individual regions or styles of things, right? And we've kind of shelved it. And season 2 started off as like a consumer podcast and has quickly become a like hospitality beverage industry podcast. But I think also through this a lot can be learned, and also, people can listen to this and you can reference this and people can listen to the person behind the suit. Yeah. Right? Like, there's more behind the som at the restaurant than just the som at the restaurant. Yeah. It's not like they go home and, only eat sashimi and eat off of, Hisami porcelain, right? Like, they're eating a fucking cheeseburger at Buster's when they get out of work, and having
wine
beers
is
with
just
their
as good with a cheeseburger as it is with that Michelin starred restaurant.
Yeah.
Like, it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah. It's about the moment.
Yeah. Well, and we've done a really good job of, thank you, sir. Why, I will have some more wine. We've done a really good job of giving ourselves monikers and creating a title. And one of my favorite things that I've heard, and Stefano Biscotto, the most Italian man in San Francisco.
Yeah, absolutely.
Will say probably the same thing I will. We have a guy we work with whose territory is the 680 corridor, so out in East Bay. And he'll be the first one to say, I'm not a som. I'm a restaurateur. I will polish glassware. I'll do dishes. I'll run tables. I'll do whatever I got to do. Like, I am here to make a restaurant work, and I love wine.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Like, are you willing to carry cases up and down stairs? Are you willing to polish your glassware? Are you willing to just sit and, figure out a menu that works for your restaurant so that your restaurant is profitable and you have an ability to talk about wine long term?
Yeah.
Like, it's an absolute privilege to sit and have a wine menu that you get to build, but it's got to pay for itself.
Got to pay for itself.
And it's a privilege to, like, I get to walk into restaurants every day, retail stores every day, and talk about wine. But the privilege of doing that comes with them buying wine from me, so I can keep doing that.
Yeah.
And it, if I'm just obsessed with the thing that I love right now, a couple people will buy it, but it's not going to pay the bills. Like, you've got to really meet people where they're at. And that includes buyers.
Where they're at.
And I mean, the biggest shift I saw going into COVID and post-COVID, most of the chefs that I knew, most of the chefs I worked with moved to Vegas, moved to Austin, moved to Denver because they could buy houses, they could have full-time jobs, and they could raise their families.
Yeah.
Most of the Psalms I knew did the same thing, and then they also went to New York, and they went to Miami, and kind of left San Francisco. And we have a new generation that are starting to come up, and a lot of them are not traditional wine buyers.
Right.
They're not the super Sami type. They're very much the everyman, which is a really good thing because that means they can buy product that they can sell.
Yeah.
And they don't need us to be hyper nerdy and talk about the specific aspect of this vineyard and the soil type on this bottom half here because there was a volcano that... I have watched people's eyes glaze over when I do that.
Yeah.
I did a staff training last week that, like, I started talking about the Willamette Valley and Eola Amity versus Yamhill and sedimentary versus the volcanics that came in from Washington. And they were like...
Loss.
What? I'm like, all right, so this is the Dundee Hills. North Willamette. Let's just start there.
Yeah.
Like, here's a valley, go up north, we're there. And they're the ones selling wine.
Yeah.
And if we can't kind of get over ourselves and actually meet them where they're at and then also make it accessible for them, they're not going to make it accessible for other people. They're going to sell them a cocktail or a beer.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got to distill it. I think that's our role, is distilling the information to make it more consumable to the people that are going to then distill it further.
Yeah.
And make it more consumable to the people that will eventually consume the product.
Yeah. Yeah. I am a big Neil deGrasse Tyson fan. He is a master of taking a subject matter that I could not fundamentally understand if you put it in front of me for the rest of my life. I'm not bright enough to figure it out. And distilling that information down and making it accessible so that you get excited about space and the history of the universe and the earth we live on and all of these wonderful things, to the point that, like, I consume a lot of information from that man.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you if he's right or not. I don't know. But he's a very, very approachable, accessible person for it. And I feel like there's an opportunity here for us to bring things back down to earth in a way that allows people to understand. Because the people that make this, they deserve the attention and the accolade and the care into every aspect of what they're putting into it, because they are really paying attention to that. They're paying attention to every little detail that goes into what goes into this bottle. But that isn't what's going to get their wine in someone's glass. And I'm still trying to figure it out myself, but there's got to be a way that we can be better at reflecting that passion, that care, that excitement without making it too overwhelming for people.
Well, I think, Neil deGrasse Tyson is a great role model in that sense, right? Taking something that's wildly complicated and distilling it down, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like, I think that's our responsibility. And also, too, like, I can study one of our producers and tell you all these fun stories about all these producers, but when I have 15 minutes in front of a buyer and I have 6 wines to sell, you're already distilling it.
Yep.
And I love Stefano because one of my favorite presentations with Stefano ever was, we went in, he poured 6 wines, he didn't talk about any of the wines, and he didn't quote any pricing, And at the end of the conversation about, how's your wife, how's your kids kind of conversation, they go like, I'll take 2 cases of that and a case of that. And he was like, okay. And we walked out of there and I was just like, what the fuck just happened? Sometimes it's not about the wine. No, it's about the conversation that the wine stimulates. That's the idea of drinking a wine blind sometimes. It's just like, let's just drink some wine and talk and chat, right?
And it's so rarely about the nerdy facts. I feel like, I don't know, I've programmed myself to be this way. Maybe you're better than I am. I'm sure you are, but I feel like I walk in so detail oriented and so, tech sheet oriented for a wine. If I say 3 things on that sheet, it's the producer name, the vintage, and the grape that's in the fucking bottle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And if they ask more questions, great. But it's rare these days. Yeah. It's rare.
It's rare. Yeah. I think you're right. But I think all of that kind of goes back to this fact of, consolidation of roles. Yeah. They don't have 30 or 45 minutes for tasting anymore. Yep. They have 20 minutes, 25 minutes if you're lucky, 30 minutes if it's their day off and they happen to be there anyways because they have a bunch of shit they have to catch up with.
Yeah. And so we have a guy in our org named Chris Kuhn who I absolutely adore. Massive respect for the man. He'll say when you're doing a staff training, smells like, tastes like, goes with. 3 things. Yeah. Right? What do you smell? How does it taste? What does it go with? Yeah. And I'll add a 4th onto that. How are we selling it? Yeah. And when we're doing staff trainings, it's often like, here's the wine, here's the quick bullet points about it. What does it smell like? What does it taste like? Great. Do you like it? Yeah. Awesome. What on your menu would you recommend somebody have this with? Yeah. Awesome. How are you going to sell it to that person? Awesome. Yeah. And call someone out, make them feel uncomfortable, make them say something, but the group will start talking. And it really is less about, what is the specific terroir? What is the specific grape? What are we doing here? It's what job does this do? Yeah. And if we're in a restaurant and we have a steak and they've got 75 Napa cabs and I walk in with a bottle from Ribera del Duero, it's doing a similar job. Yeah. It's not an identical wine. It'll do a similar job. We've got American oak, we've got big, bold, dark fruit, and we've got a customer base who will take a drink of that and say like, okay, steak, I'm happy.
I like that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there are opportunities here because they're saving 50% bottle cost on that for, against a Napa cab these days. Probably more most of the time. But if I'm talking to a staff, if I'm talking to a wine buyer, if I'm talking to somebody that is going to try and sell this bottle that I'm selling them, because I am only valuable to them if they can sell what I've given them, it's less about how cool is this and more about this is how you market it. Yeah. This is how you get it on a table.
How do I use this tool?
Absolutely.
Right? Like, hey, you just bought this really cool fucking hammer, but you have no idea how to use it.
Yeah.
Then it's pointless.
It's absolutely pointless.
It just sits on a shelf, right? Yeah. But if you show me how to use it and I can hammer this nail with it, then I go like, wow, this is a really incredible, useful tool.
And we've got a lot of folks that are going for Wine Spectator Awards right now. Yeah. And I love those times because I can sit there and say, great, here's all of my wines that are above 94 points in Wine Spectator from 75 regions. Yeah. But there's so few of those. That's not most people are not saying, how do I buy more and more wine right now? They're trying to say, how do I sell the wine that you're going to sell me? Yeah. And there's a way to sell everything, and every wine that you've got has a value somewhere. But if you can't figure out what that value prop is, there is no value prop. Like, it's just a cool thing.
I use the word holistic a lot when I'm talking about these things. This is like holistic sales. And that's what I always say. It's about the sell through. It's not about the sale, right? It's like, I can sell you a case of wine, but if you can't fucking sell it, it's only going to do me one good. Yep. I'm going to get paid on it once. Yep. Right? But like, if you can't sell it, then I did you a disservice.
The best orders are reorder.
The best orders are reorder.
Yeah. That's what it is.
That's why pods are the way to go.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. They are. No, the best orders are reorder. And quite frankly, like I don't think we think about that enough. Yeah. I don't think we think enough about what the restaurateur is going to have to go through. I've heard innumerable times frustration with people saying like, well, they didn't want to buy it because it was going to be a hand sell and they don't want to hand sell. I'm like, well, yeah, they don't have time.
They don't have time.
So don't make it a hand sell. Give them the pitch and be done with it.
Yeah.
And if you're walking in and you know that everything that person needs is something that isn't going to be a hand sell, bring them something that's not going to be a hand sell.
Or if they really like it and they're concerned about it being a hand sell, offer to do multiple staff trainings.
Yeah.
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 Help it.
Look, I've known salespeople that have gone and done nights of service to help with folks. Like it's an industry, man.
Yeah.
Like this is a group where like the really, really good people figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And that's not maybe a fair thing to say because there's got to be an entry for folks.
Sure.
Like we need people to come in. But in a time where things are protracting and we're seeing an industry where folks that have been around a long time are willing to stick with it. And a lot of folks came in out of restaurant industry to come join this post-COVID.
Yep.
There's a lot of bodies.
There's a lot of bodies.
And it's not for everybody. That's not a bad thing.
Nope.
It's just like not everybody wants to take no 75 times a day and then still come back. Like
that's our job.
That's our job. And honestly, it's fun.
Yeah.
Like for me, the no is the best part because it really is like a great.
Yeah.
What didn't work about that?
Yeah.
Awesome. I got my next job.
Or I like to come in. There's this retailer in North Beach that's like a little tiny shop off of Green Street.
Yeah.
And I walk into once a quarter.
Yeah.
And I go, hey, how's it going? Good. Everything's good. I go, how's the family? Good.
Yeah.
Good. I go, well, it's been 3 months. Here's my card.
Yep.
I know you're going to say you don't want to deal with the new distributor right now. Yep. That's okay. See you in 3 months.
Yep.
And he goes, yeah. And after 2.5 years, he's like, hey, Chris. I'm like, hey. He's like, I just, and I go like, no problem. Here's my card. And he goes, well, I have your card. I go, that's okay. Keep it,
yep.
And I go like, when you kick somebody out, let me know. I'll be here. You know, just kind of, I don't know.
And honestly,
little grit.
There's a lot of kicking people out.
There's a lot of kicking people out.
You can get there.
Yeah.
And frankly, if you're likable and if you're friendly, even if they're just throwing you a bone the first time, that's an in.
That's an in.
Like you just got to start with one.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be a million things, but access everywhere is better than a lot of access one place.
Yeah.
And that's important. You can own an entire menu and not do a ton of business, or you can own one spot and 75 menus, and all of a sudden, like I'm walking in and I see them, like, God damn it, they're back again.
Yeah.
Like that happens all the time.
That's what we always say when we go to places and we see some Breakthru wines on the menu. We're like, God damn it, Drew.
I had one of my favorite conversations I've ever had since I started this job, and it is we were at an event 2 weeks ago, showing wine with a direct competitor who I like a lot. She's a lovely person, and her comment was, hey, I had 18 of the 18 by the glasses at this restaurant, and now I have 16 because you guys have 2 of them.
Yeah.
And she was pissed.
Yeah.
And not only was I like proud that we took a couple of them, but like the respect you have for someone who's angry that they lost 2 of the 18 by the glasses.
Yeah.
That's someone who cares.
Yeah.
That's someone who did work. That's someone who paid attention.
And also notice the change.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
They've got an entire world of accounts they're working with, and they notice 2 by the glasses changed. Like that's amazing.
That's important.
And again, it's not an industry for everybody. It's not, especially the sales role is not a role for everybody.
Yeah.
But the folks who it's for, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's competitive.
Yeah.
And I love, like, some of my favorite people are people I'm directly competing with.
Yeah.
They're lovely. I would work with them tomorrow.
And you can bottle trade.
Yeah.
That's always fun.
And quite frankly, like, that's how you get exposure to stuff.
Yeah.
Like, Stefano does a really good job at making our entire division, because Breakthru is an entity, right? We've got a few divisions here. We're the fine wine division. Stefano's running that in Northern California. That's the whole thing. And the number one thing that he's been pushing since day one is learn your competitors.
Yeah.
Right? Competitive set.
Yeah.
Everything. Jinx. And
pinch poke you on me.
Yeah, there you go. I'll take some wine. But we'll do exercises in our sales meetings where he'll bring in menus from restaurants and say, okay, who's winning here?
Yeah.
Who's winning that isn't us here?
Yeah.
Great. What would you propose them? How would you get in the front door here? And it's a really good exercise. It forces you to pay attention. And it's fun to watch the folks that really care because they'll come in and they will know more than they did last time.
Yeah.
And then there's the folks that are like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. And you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm not mad about that. I totally get that. But like, oh man, it's energizing to see the folks that really tried.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
once you see the give a fuck attitude,
yeah,
it's usually fun.
Yeah.
That's when you feel a little bit more fuel.
Yeah. I got a guy on my team right now who, he'll listen to this, so I'm not going to say his name. But he came from a winemaking background and he came into this like completely green, and on our one-on-ones every week, it's all right, I'm here on this goal. I've got these targets. I'm doing this. And you're just like, fuck yeah, man. Like that is so, it's so energizing for me because it's like, that's what I want. Also, that's what I want to emulate. Like that's the energy you want in this industry. But also like, it's just fun to watch people when it clicks.
Yeah. And
because it takes time. Like the whole thing with sales is you're going to trip 1,000 times before you stand.
Yeah.
Like
it takes time, but once it catches fire, I think it catches fire really well, you know.
When you meet enough people, you build enough relationships and you start to get competitive.
Yeah.
And once you get competitive, you're done. That's it.
Yeah.
You're stuck, man.
You're hooked.
This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. So,
all right, well,
buddy,
it's getting around that time. Do you have any words of wisdom, advice, tips, tricks, anything you want to share with any listeners?
Oh man. Not wise enough to have words of wisdom. What I will say is, this is a wonderful industry full of people that, no matter how you feel about it, just desperately care about what we do and what's going on here. Keep plugging away. Don't stop preaching the good word of this, because that is how we'll break through the next thing. And keep drinking wine, man. Yeah. Like it is a special thing that we get to do every day.
Lucky.
You can have a good day, you can have a bad day, you can have your worst day, and at the end of that day, there's still a great damn glass of wine waiting there for you.
And if there's not, let us know and we'll get you one.
Yeah. Yeah. Worst things in life.
I love it. Perfect.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, buddy.